Hello, my name is Diane Schindler. You are listening to In the Know. This podcast show includes writing tips, travel tips, and my views of life from savvy and thoughtful to quirky and humorous. I hope you enjoy the show.
Crazily enough, I started a software company about 15 years ago with some friends, and Michael Crichton's book, Pray, was a foundational part. I'll tell you a little about the book and a little bit about our software company.
Great.
The book is 2002. It's a thriller about artificial intelligence and nanotechnology. And in the book, the scientists create nanoparticles that work together in something called swarms. And the concept follows things like ants, how ants are, any ant individually is very stupid and has very small 400 brain cells, but together ants can do great things. The wonderful behaviors that you see in nature, the animals don't actually talk to each other. When birds flock or when fish swim in a school, they don't tell each other, hey, let's go left or let's go right. They really live by just a few rules, swim in a tight ball, try to swim close to another fish, but try not to hit them. And you can take a few simple set of rules and you see this wonderful emergent behavior, they call it. And the idea is, that you see these complex systems with one species, or species can collaborate together and have them together. And it's really pretty amazing. So Michael Crichton's novel, of course, things go wrong and the nanoparticles, resort to kill people and take over the world. And they become little nano monsters in, of course, classic Michael Crichton, in his classic style. But the theories are solid. And we looked up a lot of his book has actual Department of Defense patents behind it. Not that he filed, of course,
Wow.
Other people did. And how did we use this in the world of much less sexy retail inventory management, which is what I work in? But we use some of those ideas to say we're going to have very simple computer programs that can work autonomously and then interact with each other in simple ways, and you get some very beautiful behavior coming out of that. So it was really fun. And yeah, we had 5 founders and we all read the book beforehand, and we really found it to be quite inspirational. And though we've sold the company, it's still running today, and it's still running our genetic algorithm.
So what's the outcome of that? What was the purpose?
Ours was to try to predict how much inventory you need to have throughout your supply chain.
Oh,
so
I
you
see.
have some little guys saying, I need more. I think customers want more. You've got some other little autonomous agents saying, well, I can get you some from here, from warehouse A or warehouse B.
Oh, so it's almost like logistics.
It is. It is definitely logistics. It's trying to, this particular that we did is trying to move your inventory through your supply chain and make sure that the end user has enough of it. But he is my all-time favorite.
We are listening to Linda Whitaker. She's a retail data scientist and a writer of science and technology thrillers. By day, she plays with numbers. By night, with words. She started writing around 2011 when she took her first mystery class with Ellen Hart, a prolific Minneapolis author. Many years of learning and perseverance have finally led her to her debut novel, The Crucible of Steele, a thriller. Linda resides with her husband in the mountains of Western North Carolina. She loves running in the forest, gardening, cooking, and playing with her dog and cat. Let's go back to this fascinating interview.
He's my
Yeah.
all-time favorite author because I think the science is actually so sound, and he just takes that little leap of, well, what if, what if you could get
Yeah.
dinosaur DNA? What if the DNA kept in the amber, right? And then the rest is
I
history.
remember reading that book when Jurassic Park,
Yeah.
when it first came out. I was fascinated and I thought, how does he know all
Yeah.
of this stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't stop there with his knowledge.
No.
That's a big loss. What a
Yes,
loss.
absolutely.
Tell us about your book.
My book is based in a lot of factual science, and it tries to be quite factual. In a nutshell, my elevator pitch, it's a fast-paced techno thriller with lots of twists and entanglements and a lot of science. My book's about a young woman who discovers she's the product of a 150-year eugenics experiment. And now her creators have more planned for the planet than the production of a superior race. They need to save the world by getting rid of ordinary people. And our heroine, Georgia Steele, has to try to stop them before many people are killed and humanity forever changed. It's called The Crucible of Steele, and she's so it's her decision of does she try to find her family and try to discover this wonderful group of superhumans, or does she try to go against them and stop them? And
The
that's her
dilemma.
crucible. That's
The
her dilemma.
dilemma. And where is the setting?
It takes place in multiple places, primarily in Atlanta, Georgia, in upstate New York, and in Honduras.
Have you traveled to Honduras?
I have not been to Honduras, but I have been to Costa Rica and Guatemala and Belize and Panama and all across the Virgin Islands and
Mhm.
Mexico and pretty much every.
Why did you choose Honduras?
I chose it because at the time I started writing this, it was the murder capital of the world. Also, in the book, I talk about how it had been leveled by a hurricane, and I had to move the timeline a little bit, but that is actually true. Hurricane Mitch was devastating for their country about 20 years ago. And it was just seemed like it was a great place to me if you were
Mhm.
going to have some real mayhem and really go in and really wreak a lot of havoc on some unsuspecting people, that this is a perfect place to do it.
And
That
so you had to do a lot of research then, I guess,
I
with the
did. I did
country.
a lot of research around where I wanted to put it. Like a lot of other places in Central America, they're quite exploited for their natural resources.
Mhm.
So there is, a lot of intervention by international forces, and that's very poor countries. So they, have to take it a lot. So they're kind of and they don't get a lot of attention from the rest of the world. So it's pretty much a good place if you're going to, do some evil deed.
I'm compelled to ask you when you started it. When did you
Ah,
start writing?
yeah, I have two things. Yeah, I'd like to tell you that. I also wouldn't mind if I could tell you a little bit about the history also of this
Sure.
science.
Sure.
I am so interested in mankind's use of technology, and a lot of times their kind of misuse of technology.
Mhm.
Starting early on, was fascinated with. First of all, with Darwin, and there's a group of folks around that time. One of them is Francis Galton, who's a half cousin of Darwin. And one thing I'm amazed by early scientists' ability to learn things without computers and
Mhm.
the internet and calculators and and spaceships and everything else, and how these people are able to discover all these things. And Darwin's cousin Galton, he just discovered things like statistics, like nothing much really. He's an early founder of statistics. He coined the term nature versus nurture. He did just all kinds of things in terms of really was the first person to take measurements of people and try to understand how characteristics and traits were inherited. And for him, it was purely scientific, and he was one of the first people to really try and measure humans and how human attributes were inherited, whether it was height or weight or intelligence or your health. And he, found all those bell curves, right? And how people, the whole idea of a normal curve, and how people have certain height, but yet, you can predict a population's height or weights, and he was the first one to do that. He got taken up into the eugenics movement after that. They kind of took him along, but he really, unfortunately, because he was really always just really trying to be more objective, I think, from my research on him. And the Galton Institute is still quite around, and you can look at it, and they still say that they're very much into objectively studying the intellect of people. And the other thing that fascinates me as a scientist is how there is no freaked out people get when you talk about that. When you talk about trying to study it like intelligence, everybody loses it, right? They're willing to do that in animals, but never humans. And that idea of if you could actually objectively try to form a race of superhumans, and somebody had done it, and they didn't get caught up in the idea of race, what would happen? And what would those people look like today? And that's one of the key kind of things that kept sticking in my head when I made this book, when I started this book. And so purely the first thing that jumped out at me automatically is they wouldn't be one race. They would be a mix of people, because you would take the best of all the people around the world and try to make them into the best human, right? And that's what we would find. And that's why our heroine, Georgia Steele, ends up being a multiracial person, because of course she's one of the super people. And the other aspect was, if this secret society existed all this time, and they had managed to quietly, generation by generation, create a superhuman, well, what would they think today? What would they think of us today?
This
I know, really, exactly. Fortunately, my book came out before coronavirus. Oh my gosh, or I finished it before coronavirus. But they would be probably not very happy with how we've taken care of our planet and how we've overpopulated it. And they, would think that something has to be done. We have to stop sitting on the sidelines and just preparing and trying to make a superhuman race. We better do something, or there's not going to be a planet for us to have our super race on. And those were kind of, and that's really what I thought. I thought, how would, what would happen if she found out that she was one of these people and she tried to find more about it? She would discover, kind of what they're up to right now. And that's kind of how she gets set on her way of trying to save the world.
Again, when did you start? I know you don't.
I started trying to save the world. No, I started many years ago, between around maybe 8 or 10 years ago, with these ideas floating in my head. But being a mathematician my whole life, I did not know how to write fiction. I had written lots of very dry white papers, but I didn't know, how to actually write. So I had started, with a mystery class in Minnesota, where I was living at the time, with Ellen Hart, who's written a lot of mysteries, a lot of cozies. And I really had to learn every single bit of writing. I had to learn everything. I had to learn what makes a good story, and what makes dialogue, and what are characters, and what is character arc, and realize that I didn't know anything about grammar or writing, or when distinguishing a M dash from a hyphen from an ellipse.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't know that.
No, I did not. Did not. My poor first proofreader, told me I was so comma happy, and she just lost.
Oh, well, that's the worst thing. So
Good
you have
place.
the scientific background that I want
Yep.
to talk about, but first, would you be willing to read
Oh,
from your book?
sure. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to. I'm going to read the opening chapter, for you. And it's a letter. It's a letter dated April 1863 in London. My dear Berkeley, I have just come back from Down House, where I was refused entrance and sent away by the great man himself. Charles, or Mr. Darwin, as he would have it, would not acknowledge my letter to him, nor accept invitation to discuss my application of his theories. I trust that some of this is due to the fact that our mutual friend, his half-cousin Francis Galton, shared with me his manuscript without knowledge or permission. This does not change the validity of the argument I have put forth. Natural selection is nature's method, or God's, depending upon which side you take, of changing the face of the world. I prefer the former. Selective breeding is already the method used by the farmer, which Darwin himself cites as proof of his theories. Human selection is simply the next logical step. Just as we can breed livestock to resist disease, a dog to watch over the livestock, or a fancy pigeon simply to please our eyes, we can also breed man to be stronger and smarter, and woman to be more flattering to the eye. We can create the mankind we want to have. Now that we have this knowledge, we must use it. We owe it to ourselves, or if you prefer, we owe it to God so that we may further his magnificent work. We must be the guardians of humanity. I did not tell the notable man that I have already started these experiments, though neither he nor I will live to see the result, as I expect it to take 10 or even 30 generations to yield any significant change, and we will be long dead by then. But this does not weaken my resolve, and to this I am certain that my name will eventually be more famous than the veritable Mr. Darwin. Yours sincerely, C.T. Edwards.
Very nice. Boy, you have set this up.
And I would love to say for your audience, there's a wonderful resource out there. It's called the Darwin Letters. It's by, I believe, the Cambridge University has done this. And I have the link on my website to it, actually. It is so wonderful. You can read over 5,000 letters to and from Darwin and his colleagues of the time. And so I really tried to get the feel of the tone of these letters, of how they're
Yeah,
writing
I
to
was
each other.
impressed with your
Yeah,
word. I was impressed
yeah,
with your word
it's
choice.
fascinating.
Yeah,
So
from years
thank
gone
you.
by. Though
Thank
you
you.
who are only a mathematician, you said you can't write. Seems to me you really captured the historical
Well,
perspective in your word choice there.
well, thank you. Yeah, it's really, really a wonderful resource, and it's a lot of fun to read and see how they talked and there anyway. It's not all scientific. There's a lot of letters in there that are personal in nature too.
I'm going to stop for a moment and thank you for listening to In the Know. If you have an interest in being interviewed, please send me an email, diane@dianeabroad.com, and I will forward to you the interview request form. What we do here on In the Know, we make sure that we help authors reach a different audience, the podcast listeners' audience. Thank you so much. But I really wanted to ask you about your background and how it
Ah,
relates to this book. But can we
sure.
start with what you're a data scientist, and so what does a data scientist do?
So a data scientist really means someone whose focus is on I think it's understanding information in the context of a business problem. Data scientists learn a lot of standard techniques which can be applied across different industries. Data science has really been brought about now by the advances we've made in computing science, and it's a marriage of computing science and math. It's understanding how to solve problems in the context of computing power that's available to you. And a lot of the focus now are on things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, if you've heard those terms floating around.
Mm-hmm.
I've been working with those for many, many years, for 20 years, been working with artificial intelligence, again, going back to our days of Prey, of Michael Crichton and
Mm-hmm.
his swarm intelligence. So in a short, that's what they do. We try to marry math with technology to come up with the best answers. Usually the best data science specialize in a particular industry because it's so important to marry the business problem, the math and the science and the technology together. And I happen to work in the field of retail data science. I work in inventory management and I work in merchandising. So when you go to the store and see what the retailer is showing you and what they want you to buy, we help with that.
Oh, I run to the idea of marketing. So you're talking about almost doing market research.
Yep, I don't, yes, there is, I don't do the research. So companies like Nielsen, specialize in research. We apply it. I work for individual retailers. So we help tell them what they need to stock, how much they need to price it at, how much inventory they need to have, what kind of promotions they need to run. We work in across fashion, across
And is
grocery.
this based on the behavior of their clientele?
Yes.
Okay.
But we
Now I under
also look at things like, yeah, and there also can be factors like weather, though, can determine how your clientele behaves, right? For example, if you're going to the grocery store and you're about to have a hurricane come in, you're going to shop very differently than on a sunny day with no threats, right? Or if you have COVID, we've been working a lot with our clients to obviously get them through this COVID crisis.
Yeah, what a
And
challenge.
yeah.
Wow. How then does being a data scientist help or hurt writing science fiction? That's what I
Uh,
want to know. Inquiring
ah,
minds want to know.
I think one way it obviously helps a lot in that I'm really familiar with a lot of the technologies, and I love to explain the technologies a little bit in my book. I think I do that more than most most writers of tech thrillers or in the science fiction genre will gloss over a lot of things. And I like to tell people a little bit about how it works, a little bit, like how do you ensure that your emails that you could pass information safely and securely. What does it mean to encrypt something, as an
Mhm.
example? I'll tell a little bit about that. And I think that maybe that helps or hurts me. I think it might hurt me in that I want to make sure I got as much of it right as I could. In some places I did have to take some shortcuts, but by and large, I think it helps because in my job every day I have to explain complex math to my retail clients. So I think that's what I try to do here. I try to explain complex concepts of technology or science and tried to do it in a way that I thought everybody could understand. And I guess that's kind of what I like to do.
I have an assumption that you had to make some choices because some of it is too technical. And yet, at some
Yes,
point, you have to explain some of that technology in order for your reader to get the concept. And so it's really a balancing act,
definitely.
not to bore people who know
Yes.
nothing and
Yes.
not to get it wrong for people who know a lot.
Exactly. So I had experts all along the way helped me. I have a professor from the University of Minnesota, it's a microbiology professor who helped me with how you would create a superhuman in the first place, right? And how you would try to get rid of the average humans and to make sure that was
See, I
science.
would be gone.
Correct.
I'm gone out of your novel. But I'm not going to take it personally, Linda.
Well, most of us are, so they're not trying to get rid of everybody. I had a technology expert to help me with, how the web works and how does the World Wide Web work. And I had an expert ancestry person who's an expert
Wow.
in doing genealogy research. And so, yeah, I made sure that, and the here is actually the worst part of writing a tech thriller and taking, years to do it, is the technology would change on me over time. And then
Mm-hmm.
ancestry was not a huge deal when I started writing this, and it's exploded. And everybody can stick their DNA up on the web. For your listeners, you may want to be careful, or at least know what you're doing, and because if you stick your DNA out there, people are going to get it. It depends how you feel about that. But that wasn't so available. You couldn't just stick your DNA up and all of a sudden find your fourth cousin living in Africa. You couldn't do that before.
I can comment on that a little bit. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't do ancestry.com,
Nope.
but I did have my DNA tested, so I know where I came from. But I didn't get involved in it because I tend to overdo. I don't do anything at 100%. I always do things more, and I knew I'd get addicted to it, so I never
Yeah.
began. So I haven't done anything with it. But now I get emails from people who say, "Oh, you're a third or fourth cousin to such and such."
That's right.
And I go in and look at so I go in and look at just the general information because I haven't purchased
Mhm.
software, and someone else has done this work.
That's right. Yeah. Yep.
Someone else has done
That's
this work, and I'm thinking, how do you? And I'm not sure why they're in my ancestry page. Who are they? And
Mhm.
are they just hobbyists? And suddenly they're filling out my pages. I don't know what that's
That's
about.
right. Yeah. So your pages can be public or private. You can check. So some of those are kind of old school genealogy research where you
Mhm,
actually
right.
map people back, right? And I try to find my grandparents, and somebody else may have a slightly different name, my grandmother was Harriet, maybe somebody called her Hattie, and you try to figure out that's actually the same person, and you keep working your way back that way. And so I think, yeah, you can make that private or public, but yes, it's like, just like there's kind of crowdsourcing of a lot of things now with the web, there's kind of our whole mapping of our ancestry,
Yeah,
which is
interesting.
interesting and scary. But the other part of, if you have your DNA tested and you give your DNA to these sites to use, well, now you don't need that actual work of mapping, because you can just look at people and you can know if you are related, if you have the same mother, cousins, all of that. They can tell you, may not know how, but they will know that you are, third cousins on your mother's side. And that is, that's not just creepy in terms of, well, somebody calls you and they tell you they're third cousin, but their law enforcement is making great use of these. They may
Yes.
find, yeah, they may
Yeah.
find a DNA of a perpetrator, and they can compare it and run it through these giant databases, millions of people, and say, well, I know you're not the person, but you have like a first cousin who is responsible for this. That I haven't taken up in my book, but there are certainly many, many books and real life stories happening every day about, tracking down people based on the DNA that you may not knowingly have put up there for that purpose. And that's
Mhm.
kind of, anyway, a lot of ethical issues that, we should probably think more about as a species. And
Yes, and I doubt that we will until it
no,
becomes
exactly.
we won't until it becomes really problematic for
That's
a
right.
greater group of people. Otherwise, we're just flying blind.
Exactly. Technology is moving so quickly. It moves in front of laws, right? It moves faster than our legal system.
Mhm.
Like, Snowden, that happened while I had written up whole parts about how the government could track you. And then Snowden came out and I was like, oh, it's so much worse than I had like ever even conceived of. So I had to write, it was so much worse than I, was throwing out there, which is usually the case in our development of technology. And, I think in some ways, science fiction I think science fiction gives a lot of ideas to the
Yes.
people doing the science. And they say, like, oh, wow, tracking people via their cell phone records. Heck yeah, let's get right on that, right?
Right. Tell me about places that you traveled that have had some impact on your book.
So I lived in the Virgin Islands and have for 10 years in the US Virgin Islands, but we traveled extensively around the Caribbean and Central America. And so was able to kind of see firsthand, how people live there and see the topology of the land and how, being independent and having to capture all your own water and live more much more independently without having Home Depots on every corner you can run to, and that influenced a lot of my understanding of how it might be to live there. And then part of the book in Atlanta, takes place at in or around the Georgia Institute of Technology, where I did go to school, because you write what you know, it's easier, right? And so one of my characters is a professor, and so I just borrowed blatantly from my background, my personal, where I lived in Atlanta, and I do go back there. I still work out of Atlanta. My company's based in Atlanta, so has a place in my heart, and I think I'm able to hopefully show that. So those are probably the two primary places.
Do you want to tell me about any reviews you have about your book?
Gosh, well, I have some very nice reviews, and I have nice review from Sally Handley, who's a author, and a really nice review from her. I am so humbled and honored, I can't even tell you. So she says, move over, Michael Crichton. There's a new science thriller writer on the scene, and her name is Ellen Whitaker. In her debut novel, The Crucible of Steele, Whitaker proves herself to be a master storyteller and a gifted writer. Rooted in Darwin's theory of natural selection, the plot of The Crucible of Steele revolves around a simple premise. If we have the ability to craft a more perfect human through genetic selection and alteration and speed up the natural selection process, why shouldn't we? The novel deals with the ethical quandaries facing a world struggling to keep up morally with the choices now possible due to technological advances. Technology consultant Georgia Steele is no computer nerd. This kick-ass protagonist is both brilliant and tough, and perhaps the only one who can stop a secret organization from ridding the world of individuals it deems to be inferior. As she searches to uncover secrets about her past, Georgia finds herself tested beyond her wildest expectations. Whitaker does a remarkable job of relating scientific information in understandable terms, all the while providing the reader with a roller coaster action ride. Reader beware, this techno thriller will keep you turning the pages long after you plan to turn out the lights.
Bravo. That's an incredible review.
Thank you.
Tell me, I can't wait to hear other stories you're working on.
I have a sequel going.
Aha.
I do.
So a sequel from this book.
Yes. The book takes place, The Crucible of Steele, in the fall of 2019. And at the end of it, Georgia has some unfinished business with the Guardians, who are the Guardians of Mankind, the secret organization that has produced the superior strain of race of people. At the beginning of 2021, we in the middle of 2021, when the next book opens, Georgia is still trying to find them, and she gets thrown into another group of folks who are also trying to find the Guardians, and they're not so nice people either. So she's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place in a company that is actively changing people. Instead of using natural selection technique, they are using a lot of technological advances. I was inspired by Elon Musk, who is doing brain implants right now. If you've read about has a company that is coming up with brain implants.
No.
Yes, he is. And there is another book that came out a long time ago called The Singularity by Ray Kurzweil. And he has long espouse this idea of the singularity, which is when people and technology become one. And that obviously is the topic of a lot of science fiction books along the way. But again, science fiction now
becomes reality.
Yes. So yes, if I look up quickly, Elon Musk and his brain chip, he has unveiled, are testing it in pigs right now with a coin-sized computer chip. He's powering it as a Fitbit in your skull, predicted to one day give people telepathy, cure paralysis, or enable superhuman vision. Need I say more?
I'm shaking. I'm sitting here shaking because the future is now.
So Neuralink, it's called the Neuralink chip.
Wow.
And my story, yes, has Georgia pitted against a Elon Musk sort of character, and still trying to find the guardians.
You have created such an interesting book where it is extremely timely.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
No.
Are you going to take 8 years? Promise me you're not going to take 8 years.
No.
Because Elon will have.
No, exactly. Right. Who knows what will happen? No. Because first, I've learned how to write, which has been a wonderful thing. And second, it's way easier when you have your characters already. I don't have to, they actually constrain you, I think, in a good way. They constrain where they live and how they act and how they speak. I don't have to worry about that stuff anymore. Now I just have to kick them out on their next adventure.
That's right. It's just to create that plot. And it sounds to me like you already are ahead of that. Well, I am so impressed, and I'm so glad, by the way, that I was able to wean my way in to your launching book event and meet you.
My goodness. The honor is mine, Diane.
And I was lucky enough to win a copy of your book. I haven't read it yet because I'm steeped in finishing my own, but I'm looking forward to reading this. This was a fascinating.
Thank you.
This was fascinating to me. And I know that it's just the tip of the iceberg. It seems to me that you already have a third book in mind.
I do, actually, but I got to get through the second one. And the other thing I have is a story. One of the characters in the book, as we mentioned, her name is Emiko, and she's the way that Georgia finds, I'm not telling you much more than's on the back cover, so it's not giving too much away. The way that Georgia initially finds out that she's part of this super race is she comes across a near twin of herself, a younger but almost twin, and that is Emiko. The short story available on my website is the story of how Emiko actually found Georgia and how she did that. And so it reveals a little bit more about just about her and them meeting and her.
And that's free on your website.
Yes. Yep.
Well, I'm going to have in the program notes a link to your website, to that Emiko page for people, so people can access that immediately. Going to have in the show notes all your contact information and a photo of you, and also the book cover and all kinds of wonderful information. This has been such a pleasure.
The pleasure's mine.
Thank you so much for listening to In the Know. If you would like to support the show, you can do so by subscribing and sharing it with your family and friends. You can like this episode, leave a comment, and even add a rating. Your support is very important to the success of In the Know. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.